My boyfriend hid me from his coworkers for 3 years and told them he was single. So I sent anniversary flowers to his office with an announcement. My boyfriend Patrick kept forgetting to introduce me to his work friends after 3 years of dating, even though he saw them every single day and went to drinks with them twice a week. He'd promised to bring me to the next happy hour, then text an hour before saying it got canceled, or turned into a guys-only thing, or moved to a location that was too far for me to get to in time. When his company had their summer picnic, Patrick said partners weren't invited, even though I later saw photos of everyone with their spouses and children playing volleyball and eating barbecue. He told me his coworkers were boring and I wouldn't enjoy meeting them anyway, but then spent every evening telling me funny stories about these supposedly boring people I'd never meet. For the holiday party, Patrick said he forgot to RSVP for me in time, and they were strict about headcount, so I had to stay home while he went alone in the suit I'd helped him pick out. He came home drunk talking about how his coworker Janet's husband was hilarious, and his boss Linda's wife made amazing cookies. All these partners I'd never meet because Patrick kept forgetting I existed when he walked into his office building. When I surprised Patrick at work with lunch on his birthday, he actually introduced me as his neighbor who happened to be in the area. His coworker Richard looked confused and said he thought Patrick was single since he'd never mentioned a girlfriend in 3 years. Patrick laughed nervously and said we'd just started dating recently, which was news to me since we'd been living together for 2 years. He rushed me out of the building saying I was making things awkward by showing up unannounced, and his workplace had strict visitor policies that I'd violated. He said bringing personal life into work was unprofessional, and I needed to respect boundaries between his career and relationship. The truth came out when I ran into Patrick's coworker Janet at a coffee shop, and she mentioned how brave Patrick was for staying single so long when everyone else was coupled up. She said Patrick was the only unmarried person in their department, and they all admired his independence and dedication to his career over relationships. She said women always threw themselves at Patrick at work events, but he never brought anyone around because he valued his freedom too much. When I told her I was Patrick's girlfriend of 3 years, Janet laughed and said that was impossible because Patrick had just last week given a presentation about the benefits of being single in your 30s. And that's when I decided Patrick's work life and personal life were about to collide in ways he'd never forget. I started by sending an enormous flower arrangement to his office for our anniversary, with a card that said, "Happy 3 years to my amazing boyfriend, Patrick Love, your live-in girlfriend." The receptionist announced it over the intercom, asking Patrick to come collect his anniversary flowers from his long-term girlfriend. His coworkers gathered around asking why he'd hidden a 3-year relationship, and Patrick had to stand there holding roses while explaining he liked to keep things private. Next, I had a bakery deliver a massive cake to his office, shaped like a house with Patrick and Rachel's home sweet home, written in frosting with little figures of us in the yard. The delivery person insisted Patrick's entire team needed to sign for it since it was so large. Everyone saw the cake celebrating our cohabitation while Patrick tried to claim it was a joke from his eccentric neighbor. His boss, Linda, asked why his neighbor would make such an elaborate joke, and Patrick couldn't answer without admitting more lies. For the company fundraiser where employees could buy raffle tickets, I donated a weekend stay at Patrick and Rachel's couples retreat, which was just our apartment, but I described it in detail in the donation listing. I included photos of our bedroom with both our belongings visible, our bathroom with our matching towels, and our living room with all our couple photos on display. Patrick's coworkers started bidding on it as a joke, asking Patrick if the girlfriend was included in the package or sold separately. He had to explain why his supposed neighbor had access to his entire apartment for photos. The real revenge came during Patrick's important client presentation, where he was pitching to land a massive account. I called his office saying I was his fiancé, and there was a family emergency requiring his immediate attention. I picture Patrick standing in that conference room, his phone lighting up over and over while he tries to keep his presentation voice steady. The receptionist probably announced the call over the speaker system, and everyone in the building heard that his fiancé needed him for an emergency. I can see him excusing himself from the client, his face red, walking past all his coworkers who are now staring at him with confused expressions. The receptionist patches me through again because I told her it's urgent, and Patrick picks up sounding panicked. I tell him there's no emergency, that I just wanted to make sure his work friends knew the truth about us, and then I hang up before he can respond. I block his number immediately because I don't want to hear whatever excuses he's going to try. Within 40 minutes, my doorbell rings and Tabitha walks in carrying 2 bottles of wine and a bag of Chinese takeout. I texted her everything while sitting on my couch feeling that weird mix of satisfaction and nervousness about what I just did. She sets the food on the coffee table and asks me to tell her the whole story from the beginning. So I explain about the flowers with the anniversary card, the house-shaped cake with our names in frosting, the raffle donation with photos of our apartment, and finally the emergency call during his biggest client meeting. Tabitha laughs so hard she spills wine on my rug, saying Patrick absolutely earned every second of public embarrassment. She asks if I feel guilty, and I tell her not really, that mostly I feel relieved that his coworkers finally know I exist. We eat lo mein straight from the containers, and she tells me about her own past relationship where a guy kept her separate from his friends for 8 months. She says watching me stand up for myself makes her wish she had done something similar, instead of just quietly breaking up and disappearing. Patrick comes home around 7 that evening, and he looks terrible. His tie is loose, his hair is messy like he's been running his hands through it, and there are actual dark circles under his eyes that weren't there this morning. He drops his briefcase by the door, and the first words out of his mouth are about how I cost him the Hardy account. He says the client walked out of the presentation saying he doesn't do business with liars, and now Patrick's boss is questioning whether he can be trusted with major accounts. His job might actually be on the line because of what I did today. I set down my wine glass and tell him that's what happens when you spend 3 years building a professional reputation on pretending your live-in girlfriend doesn't exist. Patrick's face goes from exhausted to angry in about 2 seconds. He raises his voice saying I don't understand anything about workplace dynamics or professional boundaries, that he kept things separate to avoid office gossip and drama. I ask him how our relationship existing creates drama, and he says people judge you differently when they know you're in a relationship versus when you're single. He claims he was protecting both of us from the office politics and maintaining his professional image. I point out that his professional image was built entirely on lies, so maybe it deserved to fall apart. Patrick starts pacing around the living room, saying everyone at his office now thinks he's either a pathological liar or was cheating on me with coworkers. His credibility is completely destroyed and people are looking at him differently. I tell him he actually was lying pathologically for 3 years, every single day when he walked into that building and pretended to be someone he wasn't. His assessment of the situation seems pretty accurate to me. He stops pacing and stares at me like I just slapped him. Patrick grabs his keys off the counter and says he can't be here right now, that he needs space to figure out what to do about the mess I created. He storms out and I hear his car start in the parking lot. About an hour later, my phone starts getting texts from a number I don't recognize, and I realize Patrick is using a different phone or borrowed someone's phone because I blocked him. The messages say I'm vindictive and crazy for sabotaging his career over hurt feelings, that what I did was psychological warfare and completely disproportionate to the situation. I screenshot every text where he calls me crazy and send them to Tabitha. She responds immediately saying, this is exactly why I was right to expose him, that he still doesn't understand what he did wrong and is making himself the victim. I fall asleep on the couch because our bed feels too big and too empty, even though I'm still angry. The next morning, I wake up to a LinkedIn message request from someone named Lynette Yamada. The profile picture shows a woman in her 30s with dark hair and a kind smile. Her message says she works with Patrick and she's not trying to get involved in personal business, but she has information I should probably know about his office behavior. She asks if we can meet for coffee somewhere neutral. I accept the request and message back suggesting a coffee shop that's near Patrick's office, but not the one his coworkers usually go to. We agree to meet at 2 that afternoon. I spend the morning cleaning the apartment and trying not to think about where Patrick slept last night or whether he's already telling people at work that I'm unstable. At 1:30, I drive to the coffee shop and get there early, ordering a latte and sitting at a corner table where I can see the door. Lynette walks in right at 2 and she's wearing business casual clothes like she came straight from the office. She orders tea and sits down across from me, and her first words are an apology for reaching out, but she felt like I deserved to know the truth. She tells me that Patrick didn't just hide me from his coworkers. He actively participated in single guy activities and conversations, letting female coworkers think he was available even though he never technically crossed any lines. She says he enjoyed the attention and the freedom that came with being seen as unattached. He would stay late for drinks, agree to last-minute travel for conferences, and complain about guys in the office who couldn't do those things because of their girlfriends or wives. Lynette pulls out her phone and shows me photos from various company events over the past 2 years. In every single one, Patrick is positioned with the single employees, never with the couples. She scrolls through pictures from the summer picnic I wasn't invited to, the holiday party where Patrick said there wasn't room for me, happy hours where he told me it was guys only. In all of them, he's laughing and relaxed, standing close to other women, his body language open and flirty. Lynette says he used to complain about relationship guys who couldn't stay out late or travel without checking with their partners first. Like being in a relationship was this burden that held people back professionally. She tells me she feels guilty now for not questioning his single status earlier, especially after that day I brought him birthday lunch and he introduced me as his neighbor. I ask Lynette why she's telling me all this, what made her reach out. She sets her phone down and says that 3 months ago, Patrick gave her advice about staying single to focus on career advancement, using himself as an example of how being unattached let him take opportunities that other people couldn't. She thought it was weird advice at the time, but assumed he'd gone through a bad breakup recently, and was still processing it. She never imagined he had a girlfriend he'd been living with for years while giving that advice. I thank Lynette and tell her I need to process everything she just shared with me. She nods and says she hopes I figure out what's best for me, and that she's sorry Patrick put me in this position. I walk to my car feeling like the ground shifted under my feet, because I thought Patrick was just thoughtless about including me. But now I know he was building an entire fake version of himself at work. He wasn't forgetting to mention me. He was choosing to erase me from his professional identity, while enjoying all the benefits of being seen as single and available. I drive home on autopilot, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, thinking about all those times Patrick said he needed to keep work and home separate. It wasn't about boundaries. It was about maintaining his bachelor image, so female coworkers would laugh at his jokes differently, so he could stay late without anyone wondering about a girlfriend waiting at home, so he could position himself as the unattached guy who was always available for whatever the team needed. I park in our apartment complex and sit in the car for 10 minutes trying to calm down before I go inside. When I finally walk through the door, Patrick is sitting on the couch with a massive bouquet of roses and a box of expensive chocolates from the fancy place downtown. He stands up immediately and starts talking about how he understands why I was upset, and he should have handled things better. But my actions at his office were way over the line and really destructive to his career. He says we both made mistakes, and now we need to figure out how to move past this and rebuild trust between us. He's standing there holding flowers like they're going to fix 3 years of systematic lying, and I almost laugh because he genuinely seems to think an apology, and some chocolates will make this okay. He sets the flowers on the coffee table and walks toward me with his arms out like he's going to hug me, and I step back because I can't stand the thought of him touching me right now. Patrick's face falls and he asks if we can at least talk about this like adults instead of me shutting down and refusing to communicate. I tell Patrick there's nothing to rebuild because the relationship I thought we had for 3 years never actually existed in the first place. I was dating someone who treated me like a secret he needed to hide, like acknowledging my existence would somehow damage his professional reputation or limit his options. Patrick interrupts saying that's not fair, and I'm twisting everything to make him look bad, when really he was just maintaining healthy boundaries between work and personal life. He insists he loves me, and the separation between his office life and home life wasn't about being ashamed of me. It was about keeping things professional and not mixing business with personal relationships. I ask him to explain why every single one of his coworkers brought their partners to company events while I stayed home alone, and he says those situations were different, and I'm comparing apples to oranges. He tells me I'm being emotional and not thinking clearly about what actually happened versus what I'm imagining happened. I pull out my phone and mention my conversation with Lynette this afternoon, specifically the part about Patrick giving career advice about staying single to focus on professional advancement. Patrick's face goes completely pale and his mouth opens, but no words come out for several seconds. He finally says Lynette took that conversation out of context, and he was just being a good mentor to someone earlier in their career, sharing general wisdom about not letting relationships hold you back from opportunities. I ask him how telling someone to stay single while you're living with a girlfriend for 2 years counts as general wisdom, and he stammers that he didn't mean it literally. He was speaking hypothetically about work-life balance. He tries to explain that mentoring requires sharing different perspectives, and sometimes you say things you don't personally practice. But we both know that's garbage, and he's been caught in another layer of deception. Patrick sits down heavily on the couch and puts his head in his hands, and for a moment I almost feel bad for him, until I remember he did this to himself by choosing lies over honesty for 3 solid years. I tell Patrick I want him to move out of the apartment, and his head snaps up with this shocked expression, like I just suggested something completely unreasonable. He says this is his apartment too, since we're both on the lease, and he has just as much right to be here as I do. He's legally correct, and I hate that he's technically right about this one thing, but I make it very clear that I'm done pretending we're a functional couple who can live together peacefully. I tell him he can sleep on the couch until we figure out what to do about the lease situation, but I'm not sharing a bed with someone who spent years treating me like an inconvenient secret. Patrick argues that I'm being hasty, and we should take some time to cool off before making big decisions about our living situation. He suggests maybe he could stay at a hotel for a few days to give us both space, and then we could sit down and have a calm conversation about our future. I tell him there is no future for us to discuss, and he can stay at a hotel permanently for all I care. Patrick's jaw tightens and he says, I'm going to regret throwing away a 3-year relationship over one mistake, but I'm not the one who spent 3 years making the same mistake every single day. The next week feels like living with a hostile stranger who happens to know where I keep my spare keys. And Patrick leaves for work before I wake up and doesn't come home until after 9 at night, clearly avoiding me as much as possible. I spend my evenings on my laptop looking at studio apartments in my price range, calculating whether I can afford to break the lease early, or if I need to wait until our renewal date in 4 months. The apartment feels too small and too quiet, filled with all our couple things that now just look like evidence of a relationship that was never what I thought it was. Our framed photos on the walls, the coffee maker we bought together, the couch we spent 3 weekends shopping for because Patrick wanted the perfect shade of gray. Everything reminds me that I built a life with someone who was living a completely different life the moment he walked out the door each morning. I make a spreadsheet of apartments I can afford and start contacting landlords about availability. Tabitha shows up on Saturday morning with her boyfriend's truck and a stack of boxes from the hardware store. She takes one look at my face and pulls me into a hug, then starts helping me pack my important stuff to move to her place for temporary storage. We fill boxes with my books, my winter clothes, my grandmother's dishes that I don't want Patrick accidentally breaking out of spite. Tabitha wraps each dish carefully in newspaper and tells me I can crash in her spare room whenever things get too uncomfortable here. Patrick comes out of the bedroom where he's been hiding since Tabitha arrived and watches us carry boxes down to the truck. He asks if I'm really going to throw away 3 years over one mistake, and Tabitha turns around and tells him it wasn't one mistake. It was 3 years of continuous lying. Patrick ignores her and keeps staring at me, waiting for an answer. I tell Patrick it wasn't one mistake. It was 1,000 small choices he made every single day to exclude me from his life and pretend I didn't exist the moment he got to work. It was every time he told his coworkers he was single, every time he positioned himself with the unmarried employees at company events, every time he gave advice about staying single to focus on career advancement while I was at home thinking we were building a future together. Patrick says I'm being dramatic, and plenty of couples keep their work lives and home lives completely separate without it meaning anything negative. He claims I'm taking normal professional boundaries and twisting them into some kind of betrayal, when really he was just being private about personal matters. Tabitha makes a noise of disgust and carries another box down to the truck, leaving me standing there with Patrick in our living room that doesn't feel like ours anymore. My phone rings while I'm folding clothes into a box, and the caller ID shows Patrick's mom calling. I almost don't answer because I don't want to deal with her defending her son right now, but something makes me pick up anyway. She says Patrick told her we're having problems and she wants to understand what happened between us. Her voice is kind and genuinely concerned, not accusatory. So I give her the basic facts about Patrick hiding our relationship from his coworkers for 3 years and actively presenting himself as single at work. There's a long silence on the other end of the line, and then she says she had no idea Patrick was doing that, and she's very disappointed in him. She tells me she raised him better than to treat someone he supposedly loves like a secret to be ashamed of. I sit down on the edge of the bed because hearing his own mother validate my feelings makes something crack open in my chest. Patrick's mom says she always wondered why we never came to family events together, and Patrick kept saying I was busy with work or had other commitments. She apologizes for not questioning it harder or pushing Patrick to bring me around more often. She tells me Patrick's father did something similar when he was in his 20s, treating girlfriends like they weren't important enough to integrate into his life or introduce to people who mattered. She says she hoped Patrick would be different, but apparently some patterns run deeper than she realized. She asks if there's anything she can do to help, and I tell her honestly that I just need Patrick to take responsibility for his choices instead of making excuses. She sighs and says she'll talk to him, but she understands if I've already made up my mind about the relationship. We talk for a few more minutes about practical things like the lease and my plan to find my own place, and she offers to help with moving costs if I need it. I thank her and hang up feeling strangely lighter, like having someone from Patrick's own family acknowledge that his behavior was wrong somehow makes it more real. I hang up with Patrick's mom and sit there on the bed for a while, just staring at my phone. The conversation replays in my head, especially the part where she said Patrick's dad used to do the same thing, treating girlfriends like they weren't important enough to bring around. It makes me wonder how deep this goes, whether Patrick even realizes he's repeating his father's patterns, or if he thinks he's different somehow. No, but knowing why someone acts a certain way doesn't change what they did or make it hurt less. Understanding that Patrick might have learned this behavior from his dad doesn't mean I have to accept being hidden for another 3 years or stay with someone who treats me like an embarrassing secret. I feel validated hearing his own mother say she's disappointed in him, but I also feel sad because I realize this pattern might be bigger than just Patrick being thoughtless or careless about my feelings. Still, I'm done making excuses for him or trying to fix problems he doesn't even admit exist. Patrick gets called into a meeting the next morning with Alicia Callahan from HR and Christopher Koch, his department head. He leaves the apartment early without saying goodbye, and I spend the day looking at apartment listings on my laptop while sitting at our kitchen table that won't be ours much longer. Patrick comes home that evening around 6, and the second he walks through the door, I can tell something happened. His shoulders are slumped forward and his face looks gray, like someone drained all the color out of him. He drops his briefcase by the door and just stands there for a minute before walking to the kitchen and pouring himself a glass of water. I watch him from the couch and wait for him to say something, and finally he turns around and tells me they're putting him on a performance improvement plan. His voice comes out flat and tired, like he's too exhausted to even be angry anymore. He explains that Alicia and Christopher sat him down for over an hour talking about integrity and workplace culture and how the company needs employees they can trust. They told him the lost client account with Corbin Hardy was serious, and combined with the questions about his honesty regarding personal matters, they need to see significant improvement in his professional conduct over the next 90 days. Patrick sets his glass down on the counter hard enough that water sloshes over the rim. He looks at me and says, "This is all my fault, that I humiliated him in front of everyone he works with and destroyed his professional reputation over relationship drama." He says I took private issues and made them public in the most damaging way possible, and now his career is suffering because I couldn't handle being kept separate from his work life. I stay sitting on the couch and remind him that I didn't create the lies. I just made them visible to people who deserve to know the truth. I tell him he spent 3 years actively deceiving his coworkers, presenting himself as single, giving presentations about staying unmarried and positioning himself with the unattached employees at every company function. Patrick shakes his head and says, I'm twisting everything, that he was just maintaining professional boundaries, and I'm the one who crossed lines by sending flowers and cakes and calling his office during important meetings. He says normal couples don't drag each other's workplaces into their personal problems, and I ruined his reputation because I was jealous or insecure or whatever my problem is. I stand up from the couch and walk over to where he's standing by the kitchen counter. I look him right in the eye and tell him that Christopher Koch apparently told him the company takes integrity seriously, and that lying to colleagues about personal life raises questions about professional honesty. Patrick's jaw tightens and he looks away, staring at the wall behind me instead of meeting my eyes. He says it's ridiculous that his career is being judged based on relationship choices, that what he does in his personal life shouldn't matter as long as he performs well at work. I point out that he didn't just make relationship choices, he actively lied to everyone he worked with for 3 years, and those lies involved me whether he wants to admit it or not. He says I'm being vindictive and I should be happy that I got what I wanted, which was apparently to ruin his professional life. I tell him I didn't want to ruin anything. I just wanted to exist as his girlfriend in all areas of his life, instead of being hidden like something shameful. The next few days, I spend every spare minute looking at apartments online and calling landlords. I finally find a decent studio apartment in a building about 15 minutes from my work. It's small but clean, with good natural light from a big window that faces south. The rent is higher than I'd like, but manageable if I pick up some extra freelance work on weekends. I schedule a viewing for Saturday morning and bring Tabitha with me for a second opinion. The landlord shows us around the studio, pointing out the updated kitchen appliances and the fact that utilities are included in the rent. Tabitha walks around checking the water pressure in the bathroom and opening all the cabinets while I stand in the middle of the empty space trying to picture my furniture here. After the landlord leaves to let us talk privately, Tabitha asks if I'm really ready to live alone after 3 years of sharing space with Patrick. I tell her I'm more than ready, that I need my own place where I don't have to wonder if I'm allowed to exist or not. She nods and says the apartment seems solid, and if the landlord will take me, then I should go for it. I meet the landlord in the building's small office and fill out the application. He runs my credit right there while I wait, and 20 minutes later he says I'm approved if I can put down first month, last month, and security deposit by Monday. I do the math in my head and realize it'll basically drain my savings account, but I tell him yes, and we shake hands. He gives me a lease to take home and look over, saying if I sign it and bring back the deposits by Monday afternoon, I can move in 3 weeks from today. I leave the building holding the lease agreement and feeling like I just made the biggest decision of my life. Tabitha takes me out for lunch to celebrate, and we sit in a booth at our favorite sandwich place talking about how I'll decorate the studio and what furniture I'll need to buy. She offers to help me move and says her boyfriend has a truck we can use. For the first time in weeks, I feel something like hope instead of just anger and hurt. I get back to the apartment that evening and leave the lease agreement on the kitchen counter while I go take a shower. When I come out 20 minutes later with wet hair and clean clothes, Patrick is standing in the kitchen holding the papers. He looks up at me and asks if I'm really going to move into a tiny studio instead of working things out. His voice has this edge to it like he can't believe I'm actually following through. I walk past him to the fridge and grab a bottle of water, then turn around and tell him there's nothing to work out, because I don't trust him anymore and don't want to be with someone who treats me like an inconvenience. Patrick sets the lease down and says we've been together for 3 years, we live together, we have a life built here, and I'm just going to throw all of that away. I remind him that he threw it away when he decided to pretend I didn't exist every time he walked into his office building. He says I'm being dramatic, and that plenty of couples keep their work lives and personal lives completely separate, without it meaning anything negative about the relationship. Patrick tries a different approach then, his voice getting softer and more pleading. He says he'll introduce me to everyone at work, that he'll bring me to every future happy hour and company event, that he'll prove he's changed and wants me to be part of his whole life. I lean back against the kitchen counter and look at him, really look at him, and I realize I don't want to be with someone who only values me publicly after being forced to. I tell him that's not what respect looks like, having to shame someone into acknowledging your existence. I say real respect means your partner wants to include you from the start, not because they got caught lying and faced consequences. Patrick's face hardens and he says I'm being impossible, that I won't accept his apology or his promises to change. So what exactly do I want from him? I tell him I don't want anything from him anymore, which is why I'm moving out in 3 weeks. Tabitha comes over the following Saturday with boxes and packing tape to help me start sorting through my stuff. We're in the bedroom folding clothes into boxes when Patrick comes out and leans against the doorframe watching us. He has this smile on his face that I recognize, the charming one he uses when he wants something. He looks at Tabitha and says, "She's always been such a good friend to me, and he bets she wants what's best for me, which working things out instead of making rash decisions." Tabitha stops folding the sweater in her hands and turns to look at Patrick. She stares at him for a long moment and I can see her deciding whether to be polite or honest. She chooses honest. She looks him dead in the eye and says any man who hides his girlfriend for 3 years doesn't deserve a 4th chance. And maybe he should focus on figuring out why he treated me so badly, instead of trying to manipulate my friends into convincing me to stay. Patrick's smile disappears completely. He stands there for another few seconds like he's trying to think of a response, then turns around and walks to the bedroom, closing the door harder than necessary. Tabitha and I look at each other and she raises her eyebrows. I mouth thank you at her and she grins, then goes back to folding clothes. We spend the next 3 hours packing up my winter clothes, books, and bathroom stuff. Patrick stays in the bedroom the whole time with the door closed, and I'm grateful not to have to deal with more of his attempts to change my mind. By the time Tabitha leaves that evening, I have 6 boxes packed and stacked by the front door. Looking at them makes everything feel real in a way it hasn't before. I'm actually leaving. I'm actually choosing myself over trying to fix something that was broken from the start. My sister calls me on Sunday afternoon while I'm sitting on the couch researching moving companies. She says our mom told her everything about Patrick hiding me from his coworkers and the whole office situation. Her voice has that protective older sister tone that makes me feel like I'm 16 again. She says she never liked Patrick anyway, because he always seemed like he was performing rather than being genuine, like he was playing the role of good boyfriend instead of actually being one. I ask her why she never said anything before, and she explains that she mentioned it once to our mom, but they both figured I was happy, and it wasn't their place to interfere. She says now that everything's out in the open, she realizes a lot of Patrick's behavior was concerning, and she wishes she'd pushed harder. We talk for almost an hour about relationships and red flags, and how easy it is to ignore warning signs when you're in the middle of a situation. She tells me about a guy she dated in college who kept her separate from his friend group, always making excuses for why she couldn't come to parties or hang out with everyone. She says it destroyed her self-esteem because she spent 2 years wondering what was wrong with her that made him want to hide her. I realize a lot of people probably saw red flags in my relationship with Patrick that I ignored or explained away. Monday morning, I go into work and ask my boss if I can talk to her privately. We go into her office and I close the door, then tell her I need to take a few days off to handle a personal situation. I don't give her details, but she can probably tell from my face that it's serious. She's incredibly understanding, telling me to take whatever time I need and not to worry about the projects I'm working on. Then she does something unexpected. She tells me she once dated someone who kept her separate from his friend group, always going to social events alone and making excuses for why she couldn't come. She says it destroyed her self-esteem and took her years to recover from feeling like she wasn't good enough to be included in his life. She gets why I need space and time to figure things out. I thank her and leave her office feeling grateful that I have a boss who understands, and also realizing that this pattern of men hiding their partners is apparently way more common than I thought. I realize Patrick probably expected things to blow over, but instead his attitude gets worse with every day that passes. He stops apologizing and starts making comments about how I'm throwing away 3 years over nothing, how I'm being dramatic about something most couples would just talk through. When I'm packing up my books, he walks past and mutters that I'm going to regret this when I'm alone in some tiny apartment realizing I gave up a good thing. I ignore him and keep wrapping my stuff in newspaper, but his words stick in my head even though I know they're just him trying to make me feel bad for leaving. He tells me I'm overreacting when I pack up the kitchen stuff we bought together, says normal people don't end relationships because their partner wanted to keep work separate from home. The thing is, he still doesn't get it. He thinks this is about me wanting to go to the office happy hours, not about him actively lying to everyone he worked with for 3 entire years. Lynette texts me on Tuesday asking if I want to grab lunch, and I meet her at a sandwich place near her office. She looks uncomfortable when she sits down. like she's not sure she should be telling me what she's about to say. She explains that Patrick's been eating lunch alone at his desk for the past week because nobody's inviting him to the usual group lunches anymore. The guys who used to ask him to play basketball after work stopped including him, and when he tried to join them anyway, things got awkward and quiet. She says people aren't being mean exactly, just distant, like they're not sure what else Patrick lied about, and they don't want to get too close to someone who turned out to be dishonest. Richard apparently told everyone that if Patrick could hide a whole girlfriend for 3 years, who knows what else he's hiding, and now people are being really careful around him. Lynette feels bad for him, but also says she gets why people are reacting this way, because trust is important in a workplace, and Patrick broke that trust in a pretty big way. She mentions that Patrick tried to explain himself at lunch one day, saying he just valued privacy, but Janet pointed out there's a difference between privacy and actively lying about your entire life situation. That night, I'm at Tabitha's place helping her reorganize her closet, and I tell her about what Lynette said. Part of me feels guilty hearing about Patrick eating lunch alone and being excluded from things, even though I know he brought this on himself. Tabitha stops hanging up shirts and looks at me seriously, reminding me that I'm not punishing Patrick by leaving or by exposing his lies. She says these are just natural consequences of choices he made every single day for 3 years, and if he's uncomfortable now, that's because he built his whole work identity on a lie that couldn't last forever. She asks me if I feel guilty when someone gets a speeding ticket for actually speeding, and I say no, and she says this is the same thing. Patrick constructed this elaborate house of cards where he was single at work and had a secret girlfriend at home, and I just stopped holding it up for him. The cards fell because the structure was bad, not because I knocked them over. She reminds me that I gave Patrick hundreds of chances to introduce me, to acknowledge me, to treat me like a real part of his life, and he chose not to every single time. These consequences aren't my fault. Patrick corners me in the kitchen on Thursday night while I'm making dinner. He says he's been thinking, and maybe we should try couples counseling, that there are people who specialize in trust issues and communication problems. He sounds almost desperate, talking about how we can work through this if we both commit to being honest and open going forward. I turn off the stove and tell him I don't want to work through anything because I'm tired of being the person who accommodates and adjusts and tries to understand while he just does whatever he wants. He starts to interrupt, but I keep going, explaining that counseling is for people who both want to fix something, and I don't want to fix this. I don't want to spend months or years in therapy talking about why he hid me, working on rebuilding trust that should have been there from the start. I'm exhausted from 3 years of wondering what was wrong with me that made him want to keep me separate from his real life. He says I'm giving up too easily, that all relationships take work, and I tell him there's a difference between normal relationship work and having to convince your boyfriend that you deserve to exist in his life. He looks hurt and says he never made me feel like I didn't deserve to exist, and I remind him that he literally introduced me as his neighbor when I brought him birthday lunch. Patrick asks what he's supposed to tell people about why we broke up, and I can tell he's worried about looking bad. I suggest he try telling the truth for once, that he hid his girlfriend for 3 years, and she finally got tired of being a secret. He says I'm being cruel and that I know it's more complicated than that, but I don't think it is complicated at all. He lied, I found out, I left. That's the whole story. He wants me to help him craft some narrative where we just grew apart or wanted different things, something that makes him look better to his family and friends. I tell him I'm not going to help him lie about why our relationship ended when lying is exactly what ended it in the first place. He gets angry and says expecting honesty is fine, but I'm taking it too far, that I'm trying to humiliate him by making him admit to everyone what he did. I point out that I'm not making him do anything, that these are just the actual facts of what happened, and if the truth is humiliating, then maybe he should have thought about that before doing humiliating things. He storms off to the bedroom and I go back to packing boxes, feeling lighter somehow even though the conversation was hard. Moving day finally arrives on Saturday morning and Tabitha shows up right on time with her boyfriend's truck. She's wearing old jeans and a t-shirt that says good vibes only, and she's brought coffee and breakfast sandwiches for both of us. Patrick stays in the bedroom with the door closed the entire time we're loading boxes and furniture. I can hear him moving around in there, but he never comes out to help or say goodbye or anything. Tabitha raises her eyebrows when we're carrying my desk past the bedroom door, and we can hear him watching TV in there, and she whispers that this is pretty pathetic even for him. We make 4 trips down to the truck, loading everything I'm taking with me, and Patrick doesn't appear once. When we're carrying the last box out, I stop and look at the closed bedroom door for a second, thinking maybe he'll come out and we'll have some kind of final conversation. But the door stays closed and I hear the TV volume go up and Tabitha touches my arm and says we should go. Walking out of that apartment for the last time feels strange, like I'm leaving behind a whole version of myself who thought being patient and understanding would eventually be enough. The door clicks shut behind us and I don't look back. My new studio apartment is on the third floor of an older building with big windows that let in tons of light. It's tiny compared to the place I shared with Patrick, barely big enough for my bed and desk and a small couch, but it's mine. Tabitha and her boyfriend help me carry everything up the stairs, and then they leave to get pizza while I start unpacking. I arrange my furniture and hang up my clothes and put my books on the shelf under the window. Everything fits, just barely, and I stand in the middle of the room looking at my stuff in this new space. For the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe properly, like there's not a weight sitting on my chest making everything harder. I'm not walking on eggshells or wondering if today will be the day Patrick finally introduces me to his friends. I'm not checking my phone hoping he'll invite me to something or making excuses to myself about why he keeps me separate. I'm just here in my own space and nobody's pretending I don't exist. Tabitha comes back with pizza and champagne around 7, and we sit on my floor eating pepperoni slices and drinking from plastic cups because I haven't unpacked my regular glasses yet. She raises her cup and makes a toast to never again accepting the bare minimum from men who can't appreciate what they have. I add that we're toasting to being visible and acknowledged and treated like we matter, and she says yes, exactly. We clink our plastic cups together and drink cheap champagne that tastes amazing anyway. Tabitha tells me I seem more like myself than I have in years, and I realize she's right. I'd gotten so used to making myself smaller and quieter and more convenient for Patrick that I forgot what it felt like to just exist without apologizing for it. She stays until almost midnight, helping me unpack kitchen stuff and hang pictures, and when she leaves, she hugs me tight and says she's proud of me for choosing myself. The first week in my new place is quiet and strange in ways I didn't expect. I keep thinking I hear Patrick's keys in the door, or I'll start to text him about something funny that happened before I remember we're not together anymore. I wake up on Tuesday morning and automatically start making coffee for 2 people before I catch myself. Wednesday night, I get home from work and realize I don't have to coordinate my schedule around anyone else's plans. Don't have to wonder if tonight's the night I'll finally meet his coworkers. I can eat dinner whenever I want, and watch whatever show I feel like and go to bed early or stay up late without checking with anyone. It's weird how something that should feel lonely actually feels freeing, like I've been holding my breath for 3 years and I'm finally exhaling. Lynette texts me on Friday asking how I'm settling in and mentioning that Patrick seems really withdrawn at work lately. She says he's been quiet in meetings and leaves right at 5 instead of staying late like he used to. I appreciate her checking on me, but I tell her Patrick's emotional state isn't my responsibility anymore, that he's going to have to figure out his own stuff without me trying to fix it for him. Lynette responds saying that's a healthy boundary, and she's glad I'm taking care of myself. She adds that she hopes Patrick learns something from all this, but either way, it's not my job to teach him. I thank her for being kind and for reaching out, and I mean it. It's nice to know that some good things came out of the mess, like connecting with people who actually see me as a person worth knowing. I spend that night going through my phone and laptop, blocking Patrick on every platform I can think of. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even LinkedIn, because I don't need him seeing my professional updates or trying to connect through work stuff. Each click of the block button feels weird, like I'm erasing 3 years of my life one social media account at a time. I delete our couple photos from my phone, the ones from vacations and birthdays and random Tuesday nights when we were happy, or when I thought we were happy. My thumb hovers over the delete button on a photo of us at the beach last summer, both of us tan and smiling, and I realize I'm not sad about losing the relationship anymore. I'm sad about losing the version of myself who believed his excuses and thought love meant making yourself invisible. The photos go into the trash and I empty it immediately so I can't change my mind later. Tabitha texts asking how I'm doing, and I tell her about the social media purge. She responds saying this is part of moving forward, that I'm not erasing the past but choosing not to dwell in it. She adds that keeping those digital connections would just give me reasons to check on him and torture myself, and she's right. I put my phone down and look around my studio apartment, at my stuff arranged exactly how I want it, and I feel lighter than I have in months. My sister Emily shows up Friday evening with her overnight bag and a bottle of wine, saying she took the day off work to come spend the weekend with me. We order Thai food and sit on my floor eating pad Thai straight from the containers while she asks me how I'm really doing. I tell her the truth, that some days I'm angry and some days I'm relieved, and some days I wonder if I overreacted by blowing up Patrick's life so publicly. Emily sets down her food and looks at me seriously, saying I didn't overreact at all because Patrick spent 3 years actively lying to everyone about my existence. She says any man who treats his girlfriend like a shameful secret deserves exactly what he got. We talk for hours about relationships and self-worth, and why women are taught to make themselves smaller for men who don't appreciate them. Emily tells me that watching me stand up for myself inspired her to address some issues in her own relationship, that her boyfriend Mark has been pulling similar stuff about not wanting her to meet his college friends. She confronted him last week, and he admitted he liked keeping different parts of his life separate. But after seeing what happened with Patrick, Emily told Mark that wasn't acceptable anymore. I feel good knowing something positive came from this mess, that maybe my sister won't waste 3 years like I did. We stay up until 2 in the morning talking and laughing, and when we finally go to bed, I realize I haven't thought about Patrick in hours. Monday morning, I'm at work when an email notification pops up from Patrick's personal account. The subject line says, "Please read, I'm sorry." And my stomach twists because I know I should just delete it without opening. But I click it anyway, and start reading the first paragraph where Patrick says he's been doing a lot of thinking, and realizes he was scared of commitment becoming public, scared of people having opinions about his relationship, scared of losing the freedom he had when coworkers thought he was single. He writes that he loves me and wants another chance to do things right, that he'll introduce me to everyone and bring me to every work event and prove he's changed. I close the email without finishing it and move it straight to trash, then empty the trash folder so I can't retrieve it later. Patrick's explanations don't matter anymore because even if I understand why he did it, that doesn't make it acceptable or worth staying for. Understanding someone's damage doesn't mean you have to let them damage you. Wednesday evening, I go to my first yoga class at the studio 2 blocks from my apartment. I'd wanted to try yoga for over a year, but Patrick always wanted evenings free for his schedule, wanted me available in case he decided to come home early or wanted to go out. Now my evenings are mine and I can do whatever I want without checking with anyone. The instructor is this calm woman in her 50s who talks about making space for yourself, about breathing and being present and honoring your own needs. During the final relaxation, she says something about how we teach people how to treat us by what we accept, and I lie there on my mat realizing that's exactly what I'm doing now. I'm teaching myself that I deserve better by refusing to accept less. After class, I feel stretched out and peaceful, and I sign up for the weekly session because this is something I'm doing for me. By Friday, I'm hearing through mutual friends that Patrick is telling people we broke up because I was too demanding and couldn't handle his need for work-life separation. Our friend Simon texts me asking if it's true that I expected Patrick to bring me to every single work function, and I text back the actual story about how Patrick told everyone he was single for 3 years. Simon responds with a bunch of shocked emojis and says Patrick's version made it sound like I was clingy and controlling. I'm annoyed, but not surprised that Patrick is still spinning stories instead of taking responsibility. He spent 3 years lying to his coworkers about me, so obviously he's going to lie to our friends about why we broke up. Some people would rather rewrite history than admit they were wrong. Tabitha calls me Saturday morning furious because she ran into Patrick at the grocery store and he tried to act friendly, asking how I was doing like he actually cared. She wanted to confront him right there about the lies he's spreading, wanted to tell everyone in the produce section what he really did. I tell her it doesn't matter what story Patrick tells because the people who matter know the truth. His coworkers saw the evidence firsthand with the flowers and the cake and the couple photos, and that's enough for me. Our real friends will either ask me directly or figure out Patrick's lying, and the ones who believe his version without question probably weren't good friends anyway. Tabitha says I'm being very mature about this, but she still wants to key his car, and I laugh and tell her that's not necessary. Patrick's going to have to live with what he did regardless of what stories he tells himself. Sunday evening, Lynette texts asking if I want to get drinks with her and 2 other women from Patrick's office who reached out after everything happened. I meet them at a wine bar downtown and recognize one woman from the couple photos I'd seen on social media, though we'd never actually met. Her name is Jennifer, and she tells me about her ex-husband who kept her completely separate from his work life for their entire marriage, never brought her to company events, acted like she didn't exist professionally. The other woman, Amanda, shares a similar story about a boyfriend who compartmentalized her so thoroughly that his friends didn't know about her until they'd been dating for 2 years. We sit there sharing our stories about men who treated us like secrets, and it feels good to connect with people who understand exactly what that does to your self-esteem. Jennifer says she's glad I exposed Patrick because she wishes someone had exposed her ex before she married him and wasted 10 years. We exchange numbers and make plans to meet up again next month, and I drive home feeling less alone in this experience. Amanda texts me Tuesday afternoon saying she has to tell me something awkward. She says Patrick approached her last week in the office kitchen and asked if she wanted to grab coffee sometime, barely 2 months after our breakup. She turned him down saying she doesn't date coworkers, but she wanted me to know because it seemed like information I should have. I thank her for telling me and I'm not even surprised, just tired. Patrick is already back to his old patterns, already trying to date women from work who he can keep separate and compartmentalized. He learned absolutely nothing from losing me, or from the professional embarrassment, or from having to explain his lies to everyone. Some people will always choose comfort over growth, and Patrick is apparently one of those people. This confirmation that Patrick hasn't actually changed or learned anything makes me grateful I left when I did. I could have stayed and believed his apology email, could have given him another chance to prove he'd be different, and 6 months from now I'd be right back where I started. hidden away while he presented himself however he wanted to the world, making excuses for why I couldn't meet new people or attend events. Some people will always take the path of least resistance, will always choose their comfort over someone else's needs, and I don't have to wait around hoping Patrick will become someone different. He is who he is, and that person isn't someone I want to be with. Thursday night, I open my laptop and start working on freelance projects I'd been putting off for months. Patrick always wanted evenings free for his schedule, wanted me available in case he came home and wanted company or decided we should do something. I'd turn down client work because Patrick didn't like when I was busy with my laptop instead of paying attention to him. Now I take on 3 new projects and spend my evenings building websites and designing graphics, and my work portfolio improves significantly. One client sends an email praising my creativity and attention to detail, saying she'll definitely hire me again and refer me to colleagues. I screenshot the email and send it to Tabitha with a caption about how I have value outside of being someone's hidden girlfriend, and she responds with celebration emojis and says she's proud of me for investing in myself. I spend Friday evening organizing my new bookshelf, arranging books by genre because it's something I can control when everything else felt messy for so long. The studio apartment stays quiet except for occasional street noise, and I realize I don't mind the silence anymore. 3 months ago, the quiet would have made me anxious, wondering why Patrick wasn't home yet, or if he was avoiding me, but now it just feels peaceful. Saturday morning, I walked to the bookstore on 5th Street to pick up a novel Tabitha recommended, something about a woman starting over after divorce. I'm browsing the fiction section when someone says my name, and I turn to see Janet standing there with a shopping basket full of books. She looks nervous, like she's not sure if I want to talk to her, but I smile because I'm not angry at her anymore. Janet apologizes immediately, saying she feels terrible for not realizing Patrick was lying, and she should have questioned why he never mentioned a girlfriend in 3 years. I tell her it's not her fault because Patrick was convincing and she had no reason to doubt him. We end up getting coffee at the shop next door, and Janet tells me the office culture has completely shifted since everything happened. People are more honest about their personal lives now, bringing partners to events and talking openly about relationships, instead of pretending work exists in a separate bubble. She says what I did was messy but necessary because it exposed a bigger problem with how Patrick compartmentalized everything. Janet mentions that Patrick is apparently dating someone new from a different company, and she hopes he's learned to be more honest this time. I say I hope so too, not for his sake but for whoever he's with now, because nobody deserves to be treated like a secret. We exchange numbers before leaving, and I walk home feeling lighter, because Janet's apology helped me realize that good people can be caught up in someone else's lies without being complicit. The following week, I go on a coffee date with someone I met through a friend. Nothing serious, but it feels good to sit across from a man who introduces himself properly and asks real questions about my life. His name is Zion, and he works in marketing, and when I mention my freelance design work, he asks to see my portfolio right there at the table. On our second date, he invites me to a game night with his friends, and I meet 6 people who all know about me already, because Zion told them he was seeing someone new. It feels strange at first, being included so naturally and immediately, but good in a way that makes me realize how abnormal my relationship with Patrick actually was. I go on dates with 2 other men over the next month, keeping things casual and light, just getting to know people without pressure or expectations. One of them brings me to his sister's birthday party after we've been on 3 dates, and his whole family knows I exist and treats me like a normal person Zion is dating. The contrast to Patrick's behavior becomes more obvious with every date, every casual introduction, every time someone includes me in plans without making it feel like a huge favor. Tabitha comes over Thursday night with Thai food, and we eat on my floor because I still don't have a proper dining table. She tells me I seem happier and more confident than I did throughout my entire relationship with Patrick, and I realize she's right. I spent 3 years making myself smaller to fit into the spaces Patrick allowed, adjusting my schedule around his preferences and accepting excuses that didn't make sense. Now I'm remembering who I am without those limits, picking up hobbies I'd abandoned and making plans without checking if someone else approves first. Tabitha says she watched me shrink during those years, becoming quieter and less assertive, always second-guessing myself. I tell her I didn't even notice it happening because the changes were so slow, each small accommodation building on the last until I barely recognized myself. She asks if I'm angry about the time I lost, and I say sometimes, but mostly I'm just glad I got out before losing more years to someone who didn't value me enough to acknowledge my existence publicly. My lease renewal notice arrives in the mail the next week, and I have to decide if I want to stay in this studio apartment or look for something bigger. I can afford a 1-bedroom now with my freelance income improving, maybe even a place with a small balcony or better natural light. But I sit with the renewal form for 3 days before signing it, choosing to stay in this small space that represents my independence. The studio apartment reminds me that I can take care of myself without needing someone else. that I'm complete on my own, even if the space is tight. Tabitha thinks I'm being stubborn when I could upgrade, but I explain that it's not about the apartment size, but about what it represents. This place is mine alone, decorated how I want with nobody else's opinions or preferences to consider, and that freedom matters more than extra square footage right now. Patrick texts me from a new number Tuesday afternoon, and I stare at the message for a full minute before opening it. He says he's been in therapy for 2 months and wants to apologize properly, asking if we can meet for coffee to talk. I appreciate that he's working on himself, and therapy is probably good for him, but I tell him I've moved on and don't need closure from him. The response feels mature and honest, neither cruel nor overly accommodating, just clear about where I stand. Patrick writes back saying he understands and hopes I'm doing well, which is probably the most mature interaction we've had in our entire relationship. I don't respond because I don't owe him continued communication, but I hope therapy actually helps him treat people better in the future. His problems aren't mine to solve anymore, and whatever growth he achieves needs to be for himself, not to win me back. I delete the text thread and block the new number, not out of anger, but because I'm genuinely done with that chapter of my life. My boss calls me into her office Friday morning, and I spend the walk down the hallway wondering if I did something wrong. Instead, she tells me I'm getting promoted with a significant raise, and my work quality has noticeably improved over the past few months. I thank her while trying not to look too surprised, and she mentions that she's seen a shift in my confidence and creativity since spring. Sitting back at my desk, I realize that being in a relationship where I felt constantly diminished was affecting more areas of my life than I knew. Patrick's criticism disguised as concern, his subtle ways of making me feel like I was always doing something wrong, had seeped into my professional life too. Without that constant background noise of inadequacy, my work improved because I stopped second-guessing every decision and trusted my skills again. The promotion feels like proof that leaving Patrick was the right choice, that I'm capable and valuable when someone isn't constantly undermining my self-worth. Tabitha throws me a birthday party the following month, and my apartment fills with friends who've supported me through everything. Someone asks if I'm dating anyone seriously, and I say no, but I'm not in a hurry because I'm enjoying building a life I actually like. The question doesn't make me defensive or sad, just honest about where I am right now. I spent so many years focused on making Patrick happy and trying to be enough for him that I forgot to check if the relationship was making me happy. Now I'm learning what I actually enjoy without filtering everything through someone else's preferences first. My friend Sarah says she's proud of me for choosing myself, and I realize that's exactly what I did when I sent those flowers and cake to Patrick's office. It looked like revenge from the outside, but really it was me refusing to stay invisible and demanding to be acknowledged after years of being treated like a secret. Later that night, after everyone leaves, I sit on my floor surrounded by birthday cards and think about the revenge actions I took. They were messy and public, definitely not the mature high road people always recommend taking. But they were also necessary for my self-respect, because staying silent would have meant accepting Patrick's treatment as something I deserved. The flowers and cake and phone calls weren't really about punishing Patrick. They were about refusing to be erased from his life while still being expected to participate in our relationship on his terms. Some people probably think I went too far, that I should have just broken up quietly and moved on with dignity. But dignity for whose benefit? To make Patrick's life easier after he spent 3 years lying to everyone. I needed to make noise, to force acknowledgement, to prove to myself that I mattered enough to take up space. The fallout was uncomfortable and Patrick's career suffered and his coworkers all knew his business. But those were consequences of his choices, not punishments I invented. I refused to protect him from the natural results of his dishonesty, and that refusal was the first real boundary I'd set in years. 6 months pass and I wake up in my studio apartment without checking my phone to see if Patrick texted, without wondering if today will be the day he finally acknowledges me properly, without that constant low-level anxiety that used to follow me everywhere. My mornings belong to me now, and I drink coffee in silence without someone telling me I'm doing it wrong or suggesting I should be more productive with my time. Tabitha notices the change when we meet for brunch and says I seem lighter somehow, like I'm not carrying invisible weight on my shoulders anymore. I tell her about the boundaries I've set with dating and friendships, how I don't ignore red flags or make excuses for people who treat me like an option instead of a priority. She raises her glass and says she's proud of me for choosing myself first for once in my life. Work continues going well, and my boss mentions my confidence during presentations has improved significantly, that I speak up more in meetings and advocate for my ideas instead of deferring to others. I realize Patrick's constant undermining had seeped into my professional life too, making me question my value in spaces where I should have felt secure. Without that voice in my head telling me I'm too much or not enough, I trust my instincts again, and it shows in everything I do. My sister calls one evening sounding excited and breathless, and before she says anything, I already know what's coming. She's engaged and wants me to be her maid of honor, and I say yes immediately because I'm genuinely happy for her. Her relationship with her partner is everything mine with Patrick wasn't, built on mutual respect and public commitment and the simple act of being proud to be together. They introduce each other to everyone, post photos together, talk about their future without hedging or hiding. Being around them reminds me what healthy love actually looks like, that relationships shouldn't require you to shrink yourself or accept being treated like a secret. I help my sister pick out wedding venues and listen to her talk about centerpieces and guest lists, and none of it makes me bitter or sad about my own failed relationship. Instead, it reinforces that I made the right choice leaving Patrick, that settling for less than I deserved would have been worse than being alone. Patrick crosses my mind occasionally when I see someone who looks like him, or pass the coffee shop where I used to meet him, but the thoughts don't linger or hurt the way they used to. I hope he figured out why compartmentalizing people is harmful, why hiding someone you claim to love damages both of you in ways that can't be repaired. Mostly, though, I don't think about him at all anymore, because that relationship feels like something that happened to a different version of me, someone who didn't know her worth yet. A year after everything exploded at Patrick's office, I start dating someone new who introduces me to his friends on our second date without hesitation or weird excuses. By the third month, I've met his family, and they know my name and what I do for work, and that we're together. All the basic things Patrick couldn't manage in 3 years. It's refreshingly normal to be with someone who's proud to have me in his life, who doesn't treat my presence like something that needs managing or hiding. We go to work events together, and he holds my hand in public and posts photos of us without cropping me out or making excuses. Life is pretty good right now, and I'm grateful I didn't settle for less than I deserved, that I chose visibility and respect over comfort and familiarity. The revenge I took on Patrick wasn't really about punishing him, but about refusing to stay invisible any longer, and that refusal changed everything about how I see myself and what I accept from others.